promise you, we will win Iowa and we will win this election. And we'll remind the world why this is the greatest nation on earth. God bless you, and God bless America.
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the Boston Red family, and for the hundreds of thousands of people that have joined us over the last 4 years in an exciting period in history called the election of Barack Obama, we introduce you to the final phase, the re-election campaign, two theories, pundits, people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts, unabridged, the history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. Friday Jobber from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Today's episode on the 16th of November 2018. Basically, we'll be talking about the election. We'll start that off in Georgia, the status there, and also in Florida. There's been some action going on in those two races. And on the 25th of November, we'll commemorate what would be Jerry Pippen, the late great Jerry Pippen's 79th birthday. It's November 25th. And we'll have a special program. It'll be on a Sunday. Just checked it out to make certain what we were with our dates there. But nonetheless, we'll start out with the state of Georgia and what we know at this point in time. The lead continues. This is according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Kemp, the Republican that at one time was the Secretary of State that overseed the election, and the election itself was literally one of those elections that was ripe with corruption. There was no doubt about that. And according to the latest tally, 55,000 votes. That Stacey Abrams is behind and would need 17,000 votes to force a December 4th runoff. And we'll see where all of this goes. This is one of the updates. The election could be certified today at 5 p.m. And Kemp is already basically moving in. Now, Kemp's victory is the tightest race for governor in the state of Georgia since 1966. Now, 1966 was a different point in history. The demographics were different. Now, African Americans compose 30% of the electorate in the state of Georgia that we euphemistically call followers of O.J. Simpson. And so things are moving on there. It's a very, very tight race. Let me go to the absentee ballots here. This is in the state of Georgia. Missing birth dates must be counted. That is an order from Judge Stephen Jones. Agreed with the Georgia Democratic Party and Stacey Abrams. He ruled against them on two others, but he will not require counties to accept absentee ballots with incorrect residential addresses or to accept provisional ballots cast by people who attempted to vote in a different county than where they are registered to vote. Plaintiffs have shown that they are entitled to a preliminary injunction to give relief as to the absentee ballot's date of birth. That's what Jones wrote in his finalized order that was on Wednesday. Plaintiffs have not shown that they're entitled to a preliminary injunction injunctive relief, as to the absentee ballots, residential issue, and provisional ballots issue. Now, generally speaking, when you get a preliminary injunction, that sets you at a higher standard that at the outcome you would win your lawsuit, and that's a very high standard to set up, usually a temporary stay or something of that issue. But anyway, that's quibbling. It's unclear how much effect Jones' ruling will have on the election results. Now, in Gwinnett County is already under a separate order to count ballots missing proper birthday documentation, and Secretary of State's office. Now, this is a new Secretary of State. Monday said they would accept absentee ballots missing a birth date, although it wasn't required. Now, that is kind of iffy and ippy, no doubt about that. Let me just go back here, and I don't have. I thought we would have the latest. This is actually the lawsuit. We won't get into that. Let me just check here. There's another race also. Woodall is a Democrat. The professor running against him, that is in the Georgia 7th District, is Rob Woodall, is his name. Carol Boutreau. There'll be 414 votes eking out there as Gwinnett County finalized the election results during a very tense meeting, no doubt about that. Now, early Thursday, a federal judge denied Boutreau's, that's an emergency request for the county to tally absentee ballots that have address and signature issues. In a motion filed Thursday morning, Boutreau pointed to what she saw as major discrepancies in the way absentee ballots were counted in Gwinnett and Forsyth County, which also lies in the 7th District. She said, Gwinnett voters were 10 times more likely to have their absentee ballots rejected for trivial errors than their counterparts in Forsyth County, because the Equal Protection Clause, and that's the old 14th Amendment, prevents states from validating one person over another by arbitrary and desperate treatment. The voters in one Gwinnett County cannot be made to cast votes that are less likely to be counted than voters in other counties in Georgia. That was a motion that Boutreau filed. Evidently, she found a bad judge. This judge is Lee May. Swiftly denied the request and called it tantamount to simply repackaging prior arguments from a previous request. That sometimes does happen, and dismissed the comparison to Forsyth County out of hand. Even with the newly discovered evidence, May wrote the entirety of Boutreau's legal argument on equal protection claim still rests on a single sentence without any detailed analyses of the complicated legal principle the court must resolve. In Gwinnett, 183 7th District ballots were rejected for address issues. Signature problems are some combination of multiple issues which address or signature was one of them, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So they did have a contentious meeting there in Gwinnett County. Before the results were announced, Day delivered a lengthy monologue defending his election. This is Day, the person in charge, Stephen Day, that is in Gwinnett County. Although Boutreau appears to hold on to Woodruff, his seat, close results were another ominous sign for the GOP in Atlanta suburbs that they once dominated. The GOP in Georgia, in Atlanta, used to dominate the suburban areas, whereas the city of Atlanta was the followers of O.J. Simpson. Hillary Clinton narrowly narrow win in the minority Gwinnett, I don't know why I call it Jeanette, in 73 inspired no fewer than 6 Democrats to challenge Woodall this spring, and Abrams a 14-point victory in the county, as well as Democrats successfully flipped nearby 6th district and roughly a dozen suburban state house seats last week. Undoubtedly made the 7th a tempting target in 2020. And a lot of this you have to look at as moving towards 2020. An old politician once told me, this was back in the 80s, that in any district, and he was a liberal, that if progressive candidates ran, we would run the candidate to the left of him, was very good for him, because what that would introduce progressive principles into that particular area that had once been there. At one time, this had been a strong whole of the Socialist Party. So thus, that type of situation was something that was good, period. Boudreaux was a political neophyte when she announced her congressional run last year. She hinged her campaign on health care, very good, and attacked Woodall for being out of step with the district on immigration and insurance protection for people with pre-existing conditions. Woodall campaigned on sunny messages of political unity, his office constituent service work, and the benefits of a united GOP control in Washington, which they didn't get. Ahead of the election, Woodall worried Republican operatives because of his low-key style. He repeated many of the fixtures of modern congressional campaigns, including Twitter. He rejected, and attack ads. Well, that was a good thing. That's probably what got him there. He had trouble keeping up with Boudreaux in fundraising. But again, he had the horses there and had been around. In an interview earlier this week, Woodall defended his style and insisted that he wouldn't change his tactics in 2020. Well, 2020 will be a different time period, and one of the most important things to remember, that the Democrats, the new control of the House, the first thing that they have to do is legislate. And they will go to strengthening the Voter Rights Act that will put them in a log-jammed situation with DJ Trump and old man McConnell at the Senate. But they need to do this because the public needs to understand that they'll take care of those things. Then they need to move on to the Affordable Care Act and take out any weaknesses that are there and solidify the Affordable Care Act. That is two valuable pieces of legislation, much more valuable than the quote-unquote oversight situation. Now, as far as oversight with the voter rights, yes, there can be hearings on that. But the DJ Trump matter will take care of itself. We'll go to Julian Assange in a minute and his predicament that the American government had all the time basically wanted to indict him for something, and there was an accidental mention of the charges, a sealed document with a sealed indictment that against Julian Assange. He's still in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and they had framed him on some type of sex-based charge in Sweden. Now that has went away. So now his situation is, if he does leave the Ecuadorian embassy, the right-wing Tory government that is still holding on there, any day we'll get to that, May could be out of the game, so to speak, because of Brexit and the commotions there. But we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, we finished up Georgia. Let's go very quickly to Florida and deal with Florida. We spent a little more time and had anticipated spending on it, but nonetheless we'll get there to Florida, and then we'll go to Julian Assange, and then to the University of Virginia. We'll get there to that. And maybe we'll take a break here. WBRN Radio. All right, we're back. This is from the Miami Herald, Miami-Dade, County launched a hand recount that was ordered. Now this is in the Scott Nelson race. A room full of election workers began a hand count on a Thursday night of more than 10,000 problematic ballots cast in the U.S. Senate race, joined by a room full of lawyers, no doubt about that, and volunteers from both parties. Scott, the Republican, leads incumbent Bill Nelson, Senator Nelson, by 12,000 votes statewide in the contest. And Nikki Fry is ahead by 5,000 in her race for Agriculture Commissioner over Matt Caldwell. Miami-Dade plans to start the mandated count, more than 30,000 problematic votes in the agriculture race. After it concludes the Senate race, the recount officially begun at 7:31 p.m. The inspection of 10,039 ballots would need to wait until election workers could recalibrate ballot scanning machines, then isolate ballots with the undercount or overcount for the Senate race. Counties have until noon on Sunday to complete the mandated hand count before the 2018 elections results were certified in Tallahassee on Monday, although election officials have said they will continue through the night, Thursday night. The canvassing board's looking at late early voting ballots just before 1:30 a.m. and left. The recount is set to resume at 8 a.m. this morning, Friday morning here. While Dade was part of the circus in 2000, when Republicans protesters disrupt a recount on the way in downtown Miami during the infamous Brooks Brothers riot. Miami-Dade finished its machine recount days ahead of time this week, as Brea and Palm Beach has struggled to meet the 3 p.m. deadline. Palm Beach gave up, and Brea County said Thursday evening that it had inadvertently filed its results 2 minutes late. The Secretary of State said it would not accept Brea's recount results and instead would use the unofficial results the county filed on the 10th of November. Here comes a lawsuit there. There's no doubt about that. While the machine recount tackled more than 800,000 ballots cast in Miami-Dade, the hand count results is limited to uncounted ballots where an automatic scanner could not detect a proper vote for one or another of the contest. Most of those flawed ballots are marked as the undercount, the term for ballots where a machine concluded no vote was cast for one or the other contest are subject to a recount. Some of the overcount where the voters appeared to have selected more than one candidate in a single contest. Nelson, of course, is hoping the recount will reverse his fortune and spare Democrats from losing both high-profile contests after a 6-day recount failed to change it in the governor's race. Andrew Gillum there, and DeSantis. Scott is ahead of Senator Nelson by 0.15%, well below the 0.25% that triggers a hand recount. While county workers ran scanning machines for days in closed-off rooms, the machine recount that began last Saturday. The hand recount involves a more sprawling process 20 counting teams with 2 county workers each set in front of an empty bins awaiting the overvote there. So let's finish this one up. County officials said earlier the count would continue through the night. Shortly after 1 a.m. on Friday, the canvass board said it was going to stop for the night and resume again at 8 in the morning. So that is a situation. There could be more lawsuits here in Florida on this particular situation, and this is basically where we are going. I just put this up on the Facebook page, and we'll get it up on Twitter a little bit later. Let's move on to Julian Assange and this bizarre case. Well, it's not actually that bizarre, but it is let's just say a little bit different type of case. We'll start off with the Wall Street Journal, which had an article here. U.S. is optimistic it will prosecute Assange. Over the past year, U.S. prosecutors have discussed several types of charges they could potentially bring against the founder of WikiLeaks. And this is from the Wall Street Journal on the 15th of March by, looks like Ryan, several officers, we won't even get into it. The Justice Department is planning to prosecute WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and is increasingly optimistic it will be able to get him into the U.S. Courtroom, according to people in Washington with familiar with the matter. Over the past year, U.S. prosecutors have discussed several types of charges they could potentially bring against Mr. Assange. Assange has lived in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since receiving political asylum in 2012. So he's been there 6 years, long time. Ecuadorian relationships with Assange have deteriorated sharply since last year's election. Of course, they have a new president, Lenin Moralo, who has described him as a stone in our shoe and said that his continual presence in the embassy is unsustainable. An indictment could come from the special prosecutor. Now, this is going to be a very, very interesting situation. Robert Mueller, that portrays WikiLeaks as a tool of Russian intelligence for releasing thousands of hacked Democratic emails during the 2016 campaign, but has made it more difficult to Mr. Assange to mount a defense as a journalist. Public opinion of Mr. Assange in the U.S. has dropped since the campaign. Prosecutors have considered publicly indicting Assange and to try to trigger a removal from the embassy. The people said because of detailed explanations of the evidence against Assange, has given Ecuadorian authorities a reason to turn him over. The exact charges the Justice Department might pursue remain unclear. They have involved the Espionage Act. That's been around since the old Red Scares of the early 1900s, which criminalized disclosure of national defense information. In an interview last week, the head of the Justice Department's National Security Division, Joe Dimmers, declined to comment. Ecuador has been looking to improve relations with the U.S., hosting Vice President Pence. That's not a very good sign right there. Ecuadorian Foreign Minister declined to comment. This month, the Foreign Minister, Jose Valencia, told a radio station the government hasn't received an extradition request for Mr. Assange. Mr. Assange has clashed with the Ecuadorian host over internet access, visitors, his cat, and other issues. Last month, he sued the Ecuadorians over the conditions of his confinement at a hearing last month at which the judge rejected his claims, and Mr. Assange said he expected to be forced out of the embassy soon. No doubt. Lawyer Barry Pollock said he hasn't heard prosecution was in the work. We have heard nothing from the authorities suggesting that a criminal charge against Mr. Assange is imminent. Prosecuting someone for publishing truthful information would set a terrible precedent, terrible and a dangerous precedent. The U.S. hasn't publicly commented on whether it has made plans to make, and we'll make this very clear. Let me finish up this article. It's a fairly long article. Long-time advisor Stone told associates early this year he was working to get Mr. Assange a blanket pardon from Trump, according to text messages reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Secretary of State Pompeo, however, said last year that he was, when he was CIA director of WikiLeaks, akin to a foreign hostile intelligence service and a U.S. adversary. The then Attorney General Sessions says Assange's arrest was a priority, and he's no longer the Attorney General. Trump's Justice Department has considered several prominent cases against Assange, including prosecuting him in connection with cables Ms. Manning provided, and his more recent involvement in the DNC disclosures. Prosecutors also considered trying tying to Foreign Intelligence Service people familiar with discussion said. Mueller obtained an indictment earlier this year against dozens of Russian officials, accusing them of hacking in, which they will not be returned here. In October, a judge threw out a lawsuit. We've already went over that. The rules also include housekeeping duties. Ecuador says he needs to create a harmonious relationship between Assange and the embassy. Mr. Assange and his guests will need to clean the bathroom. The document said the must feed and clean up after his cat. Oh boy. Anyway, so much of this flummery here. I guess I'll go to the Guardian here to get more of an international. The headline here is Julian Assange charged in secret mistake on U.S. filing suggests a major target of investigation. Julian Assange and to Russian interference in the 2016 election. The court filing submitted by the U.S. authorities is in an unrelated case, mentioning the existence of a criminal charge against someone named Assange, even though that was not the name of the defendant. Assange, who has been holed up in the embassy, one of Assange's attorneys, again, this is from Barry Pollock. It's a dangerous path for democracy to take, for a government to bring criminal charges against someone for publishing truthful information. The new criminal charges had apparently been filed against Mr. Assange. It is even more troubling than the haphazard manner in which the information has been revealed. Early Thursday, the Wall Street Journal reported the U.S. was preparing charges. That's what we just read. The court filing, written by Assistant U.S. Attorney Kenlon Dyer, does not specify the specific nature of any charges against Assange. It was submitted to the federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia, which handles many cases. Yeah, that's an easy district to prosecute someone. WikiLeaks being on investigation by the special prosecutor. The filing was a motion asking the court to seal charges, meaning that to be kept secret from the public. It argued that due to the sophistication of the defendants and the public publicity surrounding the case, no other procedure is likely to keep confidential the facts that Assange had been charged. It later said the complaint, supporting affidavit and arrest warrant, as well as this motion and proposed order, would need to remain sealed until Assange is arrested in connection with the charge in the criminal complaint, and can therefore no longer evade or avoid arrest or extradition. This matter, spoken to the Justice Department in Virginia's Eastern District, would not directly address the question of whether the document meant Assange has already been charged by the U.S. The court filing was in error. It was not intended name for this filing. That's from the spokesman there, Joshua Stevens, I suppose. WikiLeaks said on Twitter that the filing revealed the existence of sealed charges are a draft for them against the WikiLeaks publisher. Legal analysts said the error was likely to have been caused by the prosecutor copying or pasting from sealed documents outlining charges against Assad. Prosecutors are known to copy text from past court filings to make similar arguments in new cases, typically changing the name and relevant details accordingly. The WikiLeaks published more than 50,000 Democratic emails. The leak purported the resignation of the party's chair, disrupted the Clinton campaign, and it was the account of John Podesta. Assad's group featured in Mueller's indictment in July a copy of the hackers accused of carrying out the email feed, but not the charge itself. The July indictment said WikiLeaks urged the Russians to give them the first batch of stolen emails in the days before the Democratic convention, so it could publish them in a way that would have a high impact on what you're doing. The filing did not, however, say whether the Assange's group knew it was dealing with the Kremlin. In fact, Julian Assange has said he was not dealing there, and now on to the mistaken filing was noticed on Thursday by Seamus Hughes, I guess. Yeah, Seamus. Good Irish name. An academic at Georgetown University and former U.S. government official. It was filed in the case of a man named Kokaki. Anyway, it was submitted to the court in the Kokaki case as Kokay in August of this year and was initially sealed. The reasons for its unsealing were unclear. He is charged with coercing a 15-year-old girl to into sexual relations and gave him pornographic images, with sending her videos of anyway. Forget all the rest of this nuttiness here. The prosecutor told the court that the investigation also collected sensitive information related to national security. They told the court last week that they intended to use the evidence gathered in electronic surveillance. Now, that is a question. Now we'll fast forward to the New York Times. This is dated Charlie Savage and Michael Smith. This is dated the 16th, today's date. Justice Department prepared an indictment against Julian Assange, marking a drastic escalation of the government's year-long battle with him and and his anti-secrecy group. It's unclear if prosecutors have filed the charges, and we won't go back to how long he's lived in the Ecuadorian embassy. He's still there. Seamus Hughes, again, a terrorist expert at George Washington University. I thought he was at anyway. Who closely tracks court cases, uncovered the filing and posted on a Twitter. The Justice Department declined to say on Thursday what led to the inadvertent disclosure, but we already talked about Kokaki, whatever his name is. Kokaki's federal prosecution abruptly switched on the second page, discussing facts that someone named Assange had been secretly indicted. Another procedure short of sealing would not adequately protect the needs of law enforcement at the time, because due to sophistication of the defendant and the publicity surrounding the case, no procedure is likely to keep confidential the fact that Assange, the mouse has sprung out of the bag, so to speak. Justice Department has been studying, of course, how to prosecute him there as a conspirator with Ms. Manning crime of unauthorized disclosure of secrets relating to national defense. It's a little bit there, but the Obama administration even brought criminal charges on President number of leaks. It apparently held back on charging Julian Assange. Members of the Obama legal policy team from that era had said that they did not want to establish a precedent that it could chill investigative reporting about national security matters by threatening it as a crime. And this is the problem right here. The Washington Post, The Guardian, New York Times, etc., various other newspapers were involved in transmitting materials from WikiLeaks, and they published them. So are they a secondary publisher here? Could they be indicted? The answer is yes, they could be indicted as co-conspirators in this issue. As such, organizations, including the Times, have published many news articles based on the documents that WikiLeaks published starting in 2010, that's 8 years ago, including logs of significant combat events in the war in Afghanistan, Iran, diplomatic cables leaked by Chelsea Manning, and Democratic emails in 2016. Debate over whether to charge Assange has continued under the Trump administration, according to former government officials involved in the discussions. The possible indictment raises questions whether the Justice Department abandons concern about setting a precedent that would chill freedom of the press after WikiLeaks' role in the so-called Russian election interference and its publication that year of documents about the CIA. While prosecutors in the Manning area were focused on WikiLeaks' publication of classified documents, activity that they analyzed primarily through the lens of the Espionage Act, the Democrats' emails were not governed by documents of national security. True indeed, and the Espionage Act is a very old act. In our opinion, it's out of date, but they could use it. They've used things before in this nature, in addition to expanding their interference in the election. That's 2016. The July indictment said, referring to the presidential campaign of one Hillary Clinton, the conspirator posing as Guccifer II discussed releasing the stolen documents and timing of those released with the organization to heighten their impact on the election. And in October, we get the Ecuadorian government. That doesn't really matter. Seamus Hughes, again, the terrorist expert who is the deputy director of program on extremism, as George Washington University posted a screenshot of the court filing shortly after the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday. You guys should read EDV court filings more. Hughes wrote, cheaper than a journal subscription. So, this is Seamus Hughes and his work here, the Julian Assange story, where it goes. Well, no doubt it would have a very, very chilling effect on investigative reporting dating back to the Pentagon Papers. And one thing to also note here, that the court today is much, much more conservative than the court was with the U.S. versus the New York Times. That was the case involving Dr. Daniel Ellsberg and his release of the Pentagon Papers. And of course, when they were released, we all went down and got them. They were released in a printed form that the New York Times published them, and you got them in paperback. I don't remember what they cost now. I used to have a copy somewhere on a bookshelf. I doubt it we have it now. Anyway, let me get over to the University of Virginia, Larry Sabato's crystal ball. That is the opposite of our Ouija board. The subject of this is Miles Coleman. He's a guest columnist here. The crystal ball will be on holiday for Thanksgiving. Wish all the readers a safe and happy holiday. We wish you that also. And after the holidays, make a note to watch the 20th anniversary American Democracy Conference on the morning of the 28th. The conference will feature key speakers, Representative Adam Schiff, Ted Lyon Cruz. Oh boy, I think we'll skip this one. Anyway, on to the story here. We won't go into much detail on it. Last week, the Republicans tried to knock off incumbent Democratic senators in 10 states won by DJ Trump. While some of these Republican challenges won, 9 of the 10 ran well behind DJ Trump, showing in 216. That's to be expected. The one exception where Trump performance wasn't that much difference was Florida, which is in the midst, obviously, of a lot of shenanigans in Florida. They're still stealing votes down there. The following map compares Trump's performance in the 10 states to the performance of the GOP candidates in each. Tracking the performance in the Senate, Democrats, Trump 10. Heading into 2018, Democrats seem to have many advantages, as their party typically does in a midterm year. However, one factor that was decidedly slanted against them was the Senate map, no doubt about that. 26 of the 49 members faced electorate. 10 Democrat incumbents were on the ballot in states that DJ Trump won. Now, these states, Democrats hung on to at least 6 of these states: Michigan, Montana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. Republicans won 3: Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota. Well, North Dakota had been a very red state for a very long time. And Missouri, yes, and Indiana. The last action in Indiana, it's been a very long time. They've had Republican senators there, going back to Birch Bayh, a Democrat there, bloody Indiana. Barack Obama won in 2008. A different situation there. And, of course, Senator Donnelly. On our Ouija board, we went along with the re-election of Senator Donnelly. I looked at the model and doubted that he could win, but again, we did that. We didn't on Claire McCaskill. She was definitely on the water, and we knew it. the same thing with, but we went with her. Heidi Heidekant was one, and that was in North Dakota. West Virginia, we don't have to say anything about that. We can look at the map here. Morrissey was minus 3.3 versus Trump, what was he? 41.7% in the state of West Virginia. So we look at, let me see here. Oh, county level performance as well. We don't need to go that far down. In North Dakota, Kramer, a plus 10.8 versus Trump's 35.7. Where she was raised in Richland County, the bluest county in southeast, so she had considerable personal vote there. Kramer's likewise underperformance. Trump in heavy Native American counties such as Sioux and Rolette. Since the mid-2000s, the western part of the state has seen explosive growth from the, of course, petroleum industry. Politically, this gave the state a right-wing McKenzie County on the western border. It is a great example of this. It's the center of the boom. It cast 781 more votes in 2018 than in 12. Heidekant's deficit went from 28% to 44%. Well, in Ohio, Sherrod Brown ran for re-election there. Renacy negative 6.4. DJ Trump had 8.1. In Pennsylvania, Barletta negative 12.9, and Trump was at a plus 0.7 there. In Wisconsin, totally different situation there. We had Tammy Baldwin won a second term by double digits there. The Republican candidate was never very, very close at all in that thing. So best performance in the southern part of the state. DJ Trump barely carried the state. Linfer Volkemeyer had a base in strong Republican and suburban counties surrounding Milwaukee, which is Wabasha County is a great illustration of a relative strength. In 2016, Trump was the first Republican presidential nominee this party to take less than 60%. This century, it left anyway. So that was the situation there. She did not perform very well at all. Now this is to Indiana. Senator Donnelly, Braun plus 5.9. Trump was 19%. Senator Donnelly was defeated in his bid for second term by a former state rep there. Anyway, served 6 years in the House, represented the South Bend area where Donnelly's from. That is Notre Dame. The old district is essentially the bright spot in the northern part of the district. Braun had a hard time running ahead of Trump here. Southwest Indiana but once swung, but in 2016 Trump posted atypical strong numbers in that area. Anyway, that's Indiana. Then we go to Michigan. Debbie Stabenow. That was an interesting situation. We had seen some polling that showed the race closer than it was. A veteran named John James, while Trump carried Michigan by 0.2%. James lost by 6.5%. That was a little closer, actually. It did become a much closer race. Trump's strongest region were thumped as well in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. These areas are heavy rural areas and a fading Union presence up in that area. James, by contrast, held up better in the Detroit, Grand Rapids area. The president ran significantly behind the partisan baseline with suburban voters in the state of Michigan. So basically you had a 6-point race. It had been double digits most of the time. Hockley here, 6%. Trump had 8%. That's in Missouri. Montana, Rosendale, that was somebody that Trump invested in. Trump ran it by 20.2. Rosendale was a negative 6.3 in the state of Montana. He was a state auditor. Came up about 3.6. That's against John Tester. Their represented state senate in the eastern part of the state. Not surprising, he did relatively well in that area. By contrast, the counties that Tester was born and raised in, Conatura and Hill, Rosendale struggled in those areas, so Tester pulled it out. I think he used to be an organic farmer, quite literally. In Florida, well, that is the one we've already talked about. Florida, Scott at a 0.15%, DJ Trump at 1.2% in the state of Florida. Let's get the conclusion in here, and we'll do the sports. Overall, Republican Senate candidates ran well behind DJ Trump, although that didn't prevent at least 3 of the candidates, and we already talked about Brahm, Hockley, and Kramer. But again, in North Dakota, that was a given. People knew that she was going to lose. And Hockley and Claire McCaskill, well, we had our take on that race at one time. If Claire McCaskill could somehow get a majority of the voters that voted against the Republican initiative, Right to Work initiative, didn't happen. So that shows kind of a mixed bag. And you did have people in Missouri that voted for, say, Barack Obama. Although I believe we came up short. We came short in Missouri. Anyway, that state's been going the wrong direction for a very long time. This is all we have from the people of okay, he's at Decision Desk HQ. That is where you can find Miles Coleman that is writing there. We'll do the sports now. In the NBA, well, let's do the National Hockey League here. In the National Hockey League last night.
On Kane that time from Barbashev. Now walking in his tape.
Anyway, you heard a little ESPN. The Rangers were at the Islanders out in a 7-6. The Devils were at the Flyers, and the Devils shut out the Flyers 3-0. The Lightning and the Penguins in Pittsburgh. Lightning 4-3. The Panthers and Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets 7-3 was the final there. The Red Wings of Detroit, the Senators. It was the Senators 2-1. The Canucks and the Wild. It was the Wild 6-2. Unbelievable. The Canadiens and Flames. It was Canadiens 3-2. The Predators and Coyotes. I like that name. Coyotes 2-1 over the Predators. And the Maple Leafs and Sharks. It was the Maple Leafs. I guess the Sharks didn't get out of the ocean. Anyway, 6-3 was the score there. On to the NBA last night. Let me get the right day here. All right. Getting ahead of ourselves a little bit there. The Warriors and Rockets in Houston. Rockets 107-86. The Hawks and Nuggets in Denver. It was Denver 138-93. And finally, the Spurs and Clippers in Los Angeles. It was the Clippers 116-111. So that is the NBA. I don't know. We'll start giving some soccer scores here when we have time. Incidentally, this weekend we'll have a numbers man. That is our economics report from the macro angle that will come up this weekend. And we hope to finish up our open source report. We're sort of going in the wrong direction here. And, oops. I don't know why everything is on Thursday and not on Friday. Even the hockey people. Well, let's see here. Kazakhstan, 1-1. There was a final there, I guess. And Dora 1-2. Georgia 1-1. Austria, what's going on here? It says Thursday. Okay. Greece 1 over Finland. And Hungary 2 over Estonia. Luxembourg, Belarus 2-0 over Luxembourg. And Moldova 1 over San Marcos. I'm not sure. Uzbekistan and Lebanon 1-1. Iran 1 over Trinidad Tobago. Wow. And the Czech Republic and Poland was Czech Republic 1 over there. And Israel 7 and Guatemala nothing. Germany 3. Russia 0. Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Goose eggs for both. England 3 over U.S. And Peru and Ecuador 2-0. And let's see, Kuwait and Bahrain 0-0. I'm not even sure what some of these nations even are here. San Pablo, our local club here, and 1-1 with Jimo. International 2 over America MG. We've gotten down here. Oh, this is Brazil. Well, we had the Brazil series. Anyway, we won't mess around with those. But in the U.S. here, men's soccer, Connecticut 4-3 over Rhode Island. Akron 3-1 over the Riders, whoever they are. Charlotte 2-2 with Georgia State. Oh, NCAA men's soccer. So we jumped in here. Anyway, High Point was James Madison 3-0 over High Point. Michigan and Princeton 1-1. Michigan State 2-0 over Illinois. Chicago. New Hampshire and Colgate 1-0 there. North Carolina 4-1 over Campbell. And North Carolina, whatever, Wilmington, I think. And Furman 0-0. Portland 1-0 over UCLA. West Virginia 4-2 over Brooklyn. Air Force 4-0 over Central Arkansas. Oregon State 2-1 over SMU. First time we've ever gave NCAA soccer scores. Anyway, Pacific 1-0 over USC Riverside, and finally USC Irvine 1-1 with Grand Canyon University. I'm not sure where that is. Washington and Lipkin 0-0. Oh, this is... Whoa, we keep moving around here. All these leagues that I know nothing about. Indian League Churchill brothers, and we won't even try to pronounce the name. Anyway, this will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was. That's on Saturday morning. And again, the highlights here: Julian Assange under indictment. We didn't report the wildfires in Los Angeles. A devastating situation out there. And let me very quickly get to that, and we'll just do it for the BBC. We had it from the LA Times here, but we'll just do it for the BBC. That is horrific. That's the only way I can... more than 600 people are missing in those wildfires. 631 are missing in the wildfires out in California. Campfire started the state's most deadly, most destructive, has killed at least 63 people. 7,000 buildings have been destroyed. We did have an article here on what inmates in California were fighting. 9,400 firefighters are currently battling the flames of the campfire operation there. And there's also some talk about lawsuits against the electric authority there. We'll cover this more on the week that was, when we'll have more time. And from the LA Times, we unfortunately, I guess it slipped away from us. But anyway, we'll have it. Earlier I had looked at the LA Times. We'll have that. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was. That's tomorrow morning. Good day.